Even though The Amazing World of Gumball is generally considered one of the most creative and entertaining shows of all time, it also has some really low points, which lead to triggering, uncomfortable, and awkward episodes. So to figure out which episodes you might want to avoid, we're gonna go over the 10 worst rated episodes of the show, starting with The Laziest. This episode starts with Richard challenging Gumball and Darwin to a lazy competition, and whoever wins has to do all the chores in the house. And we all know that Gumball and Darwin do not want to do those chores. So after searching all over Elmore for someone who can take their place in the lazy competition, they talk to some old people and hear about the legend of a man named Lazy Larry, who actually just turns out to be Larry, the hardest working man in Elmore, mind you. So Gumball and Darwin go to Larry at his job and ask Larry if he can out-lazy Richard Watterson in a lazy competition, which seems completely impossible. But there's actually a twist, because it turns out that Larry used to be the laziest man in Elmore before he got all his jobs. But one day, after Richard Watterson took over the role as the laziest person in Elmore, Larry turned his life around and actually started contributing to society, getting a car, a house, and a girlfriend. But because Lazy Larry is Gumball and Darwin's only hope in not doing their chores, they decide to completely ruin his life and force him into becoming Lazy Larry again. They do this by getting him fired,
Leave me alone!
Shouting at customers, Needlemeyer. Gonna have to let you go.
Now that you don't have a job anymore, will you come to our lazy off?
No!
making him crash his car,
Please do it, Larry! Please do it, Larry! Please do it, Larry!
and making the poor man lose his girlfriend.
Please do it, Larry! Please do it, Larry!
Get out of my life!
I can take a hint, Lawrence. Please do it, Larry!
So eventually, Larry caves and becomes Lazy Larry again, completely ruining his life in the process. And then after Gumball and Darwin go home to have Larry compete in the lazy competition, it turns out Larry didn't even show up because he's too lazy. The reason this episode is so hated is because it just makes you feel bad for Larry. He had his life completely figured out. He was on the right track doing all his jobs and doing everything that you would want in life. And then Gumball and Darwin just step in and literally ruin everything he's been building for the past few years and make him go back to being a straight up loser. And Richard was behaving totally out of character in this episode too. It's funny seeing him lazy, but he took it too far. He was just completely insufferable to watch. And it's clear that the fans think this too, since the episode has the 10th lowest rating of any Gumball episode, which is still a 7.1, which honestly, I gotta say, is pretty impressive, which makes it clear how good the show actually is. But even a show this good is bound to have some really big issues. Like, for example, this next episode, which gets totally ruined by a single character. The episode, The Third, starts with Gumball and Darwin getting bored of playing Dodger Dare together. So, to make things fun again, they decide to get a third person in their friend group. After looking through their options at school, none of them really fit the vibe they're looking for, with most of their classmates at school just being too weird. But when all hope is lost of making a new friend, they stumble upon Tobias in the bathroom, who on paper seems to meet all the criteria of being their new friend, with him being athletic, rich, and way more normal than anyone else in Elmore. But the only problem is, for him to be their friend, he makes them pay $10, which should have instantly been a red flag. But they ignore this, and as we will see, Gumball and Darwin quickly live to regret this. Because Darwin's the one who gave Tobias the money, Tobias decides to solely just be Darwin's friend, and completely ignores Gumball, which makes Gumball really jealous, and because Gumball has a massive ego, he can't let this slide. So to get back at Darwin, he pretends that Alan is his new best friend. But this is obviously forced, as Gumball doesn't even know his name.
Oh, come on, Adrian. Did I ask for your opinion, Alfred? Oh, Arthur. Who am I kidding?
Dude, it's never too late for friendship.
Yes! I'll never forget you, Adam! Andrew! Alice!
Meanwhile, Darwin pays Tobias another $10 and is about to have the time of his life playing video games with Tobias. But it turns out, paying for this fake friend wasn't all it was made out to be. Because when Gumball gets sick of playing with Alan, he goes over to Tobias's house and sees that Darwin is sick of hanging out with Tobias, realizing that he was never a true friend to him in the first place. So at the end, Gumball and Darwin reconnect and end up completely ditching Tobias. I gotta say, it makes sense why this episode is hated so much. This is the first time we meet Tobias, who by himself is a character you're basically meant to hate. The forced conflict between Gumball and Darwin feels like it's lacking depth compared to other similar concepts that were executed much better in other episodes. And let's not even talk about the ending, which just feels completely rushed, and like a way to completely resolve the conflict just for things to go back to normal without much of a real payoff. Overall, this episode was just kind of mid, and has a lot of missed potential, since it was one of the earliest episodes of the show, unlike number 8 on this list called The Potion, which starts with Gumball and Darwin helping Hector on a school project. But after Hector accidentally ruins their school project by sneezing on it, he starts really realizing that he actually hates being a giant. Gumball, being the scheming little goofball he is, decides to make a shrinking potion to help Hector out, even though Miss Yodathum said specifically not to make it, because it has some really bad side effects. They convince Hector to drink the potion.
Okay, the side effects may include total annihilation, a fate worse than total annihilation, and a fate worse than a fate worse than total annihilation. But what if you actually survive it?
At first, Hector really enjoys being small, doing all the things that most normal people do, like looking at people up close and getting bullied. Yeah, being normal isn't all it's cracked up to be. So predictably, Hector wants to go back to normal, and after some convincing, they go back to Gumball's house where they try to make a growth potion. But of course, it wouldn't be a Gumball episode without everything going wrong.
Man, did you hear that? Oh! Ah! He looks like the blobfish from the internet kissed the drain at the bottom of the pool. Ah! He looks like a one-man parade float. Ah! He looks like a carpet made out of Greek grandpa's tummy tucks.
Guys, I'm feeling a bit peculiar.
Hector keeps transforming into a bunch of really weird things, all because they missed one ingredient in the recipe. So Gumball and Darwin rush back to Miss Yodathum's cave to sneak in and get the final ingredient so they can turn Hector back to normal like nothing ever happened. And after sneaking around, they finally get the missing ingredient and can turn him back to normal. But it turns out the whole time Miss Yodathum knew, because when they called her earlier, Darwin forgot to hang up the phone, so she knew the entire time. And Miss Yodathum actually tricked them in the end by making Gumball and Darwin drink a switching hands with butts potion. Well, in all honesty, this episode wasn't the worst. It definitely had the potential to be much better. They could have really leaned into Hector being small more, and maybe having more character development and truly leaning into the challenges of being small. Instead, all we really got in this episode is a quick montage of him experiencing normal things, and then wanting to go back to normal, which is why it feels so disappointing to most fans. But these episodes are only gonna get worse. At number 7, we have the boombox, which is just straight up frustrating. The episode kicks off with Gumball and Darwin goofing around at school, when Juke rushes in trying to communicate something urgent through beatboxing. The boys can't understand him though, so they go on the computer and desperately try to figure out what he's saying. First, they try to do this by figuring out what language he's speaking, but when that doesn't work, they have him type his message on the computer, which is actually a really smart idea, but it turns out he can only type in boombox language, so that doesn't really help. So in an attempt to solve this, they translate his gibberish into like 8 different languages until it finally somehow comes out to "the ape is no more," which leads them to believe that Juke is announcing that Miss Simeon is retiring.
Number 1, I have not retired. And number 2, if I was retiring, you'd still have to go to school. And what are you doing out here?
I felt sure it was a fire drill and I was gonna... All you kids back inside, you hear me?
After this mix-up, they meet back in the hall with Alan. Being the perfect little angel he is, he tries to help them understand what Juke is saying, because he knows a little bit of beatbox language himself. He communicates with Juke, and we hear something about an event called Gumball Fest, before Alan gets dragged into the bathroom. Now that Gumball and Darwin are left alone and have no idea what Gumball Fest means, they look it up on the computer, but they still can't find anything. So they decide to do a bunch of random things that they think Gumball Fest is, ways to try to make Juke feel included. These include things like blindfolding him, pushing him into the pool, making him eat a cute innocent squirrel, and having a grobble fight, which includes throwing oranges at each other. But through the chaos, they accidentally throw an orange at Juke, and it hits the switch that activates his voice, which Juke couldn't reach because his arms were too short. Great, finally, they solved the entire premise of this episode. But then the most frustrating thing happens, because Gumball and Darwin continue fighting, being so locked in that they completely tune out Juke talking to them.
You can stop fighting. I appreciate the effort, but I have no idea what this Gravelfest thing is. Boomboxenberg is a continent. There's more than one country, you know. Scratchistan, Luxembourg, Raplia, the Democratic Republic of Rhythm.
Quiet, Juke, we're trying to help you.
And when Gumball and Darwin finally stop arguing, they hug Juke and accidentally flip his switch down, setting him back to beatboxing mode. This is honestly one of the most frustrating episodes of Gumball I've ever seen. Literally 10 minutes of build-up to this payoff, and when we finally get there, it gets completely set back, because Gumball and Darwin are just complete idiots. It makes you feel like you just wasted your time watching this episode, and it's not surprising why it's one of the lower rated ones on this list. But it's only gonna keep getting worse, as we're now on to our first episode, which is a score below 7. The episode starts with Bobbert feeling left out and wanting to be a real boy. Gumball and Darwin see him being sad, decide to teach him how to be more human. They start demonstrating emotions, and even giving him permission to mimic Gumball's voice to practice being a human, which ends up being a horrible mistake.
I'm a real boy on the inside, but not on the outside. Initiating transformation.
Bobbert, time for dinner simulation.
Coming, Mom Unit.
When Gumball goes to school the next day, he notices something weird after Rocky says that he already ordered food earlier that day. So when he goes to investigate, he finds that Bobbert is somehow tricking everyone into thinking he's Gumball with that mid-disguise. Get that out of here, bro. What the hell is that? And when fake Gumball gets a kiss from Penny, it's the last straw that causes Gumball to snap. So Gumball goes up to him and tells him that it's not cool to try to copy him. But Bobbert, someone who's obviously never experienced human love and affection, isn't gonna give this new life up that easy. Then he decides to take it a step even further, since when Gumball goes home for dinner, it seems that Bobbert somehow replaced him in his own home, with his family even believing that Bobbert is Gumball. Seriously, is everyone in this episode blind? Gumball is forced to sleep in the grass and even gets squirted on by the sprinklers. Poor guy. The next day, Gumball is fed up, so he confronts Bobbert, which makes him initiate self-defense protocol that turns him into a giant Terminator robot. Ah, yeah, very human Bobbert. Anyways, they have a giant fight, and it seems hopeless until Bobbert gets short-circuited by the very same sprinkler that Gumball got sprayed with when he was sleeping. Once Bobbert is weakened, Gumball takes the opportunity to reboot Bobbert, but Bobbert wouldn't go down without one last attempt at survival.
No, please. You made me in your image. We are two of a kind. Think of the things we can do together, Gumball. Please, please don't reboot me.
Let me think about it. No!
At the end of the day, they agree that it's probably for the better that they stay themselves and don't copy each other anymore. At least that's what it seems.
Come on, dude, let's watch TV.
What was that?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. What are you waiting for? Oh, okay. What are you waiting for?
This episode is hated by many fans for Gumball's suffering throughout the episode. From losing his own identity to being outdone by Bobbert, it feels excessive and lacks the usual lightheartedness the show is known for. The episode ends without a satisfying conclusion, and Bobbert's drastic actions seem out of character, especially considering his usual logical and emotionless demeanor. The sudden change kind of feels forced and inconsistent. But now we're on to the top 5, which is when the ratings really start to drop. The Understanding is an episode that tried to be deep, but ended up being one of the most confusing and disjointed episodes in the entire show. It kicks off with Principal Brown introducing a new student, Peter Pepperoni, who was forced to go to school after being homeschooled was banned in Elmore. But Principal Brown doesn't want to deal with the poor guy, so he tasks Gumball and Darwin with showing Peter around the school. Peter speaks a bizarre mix of English and gibberish, making it completely impossible to understand. understand him, but not wanting to hurt his feelings, the boys pretend to understand what he's saying, leading to a series of increasingly awkward and exhausting interactions.
So, Peter, what do you want to do first?
Well, wherever I'm cool. Lunch over in the canteen there at the locker, the hunger sandwich, and maybe some ketchup.
Excuse me?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
What?
Run that by me again.
Could you maybe spell that for me?
Say what?
A little slower?
Huh? What now?
I beg your pardon.
Wait.
No.
I think I got it. Are you saying you want to grease a stinking leopard at the hacky sack convention?
I was saying just not. There's too much of it. Am I right?
As Gumball and Darwin try to continue to understand what Peter's saying, they find themselves stuck in Peter's life, even meeting his parents and getting dragged to come along to some event, which of course they have no idea what it is because bro is speaking Japanese. But the situation gets much worse when the pepperonis pull out the ski masks and involve the boys in a heist to steal government documents, protesting the ban on homeschooling. But somehow, through this whole situation, Gumball and Darwin don't even understand what's going on.
We know you boys share our views. Peter's always saying how you agree with him on practically everything.
About what?
About the government.
Government?
Ah, the government! Don't get me started on the government with their endless forms and their red tape!
Oh, it's the next left, honey.
They do a chase around town until they eventually get cornered, and in a last-ditch effort, they set the car down a cliff, destroying all the documents so the people of Elmore can live freely. Peter's parents get arrested for this, but not without one final speech from Peter.
Please, do not judge these actions in facts of one or both, or all, but understand that it's not the deed, or even the doer that is. For was Benjamin Washington Abrams, who liberty said that they do, but do not sometimes, and if so, two in the bush, and one not free stone. So I ask, please, my old lady and fathers, not to them, but to our societies, and no independences, but for America.
I don't know what he's saying, but it's beautiful.
Oh, and all those files you destroyed? They're all on the internet anyway. Bye!
This episode has a really overcomplicated plot. It attempts to tackle themes of communication and understanding, but ends up with an overcomplicated storyline involving government conspiracies and anarchist pizza people. While Gumball is known for having its clever humor, this episode's jokes often fall flat, relying too heavily on the absurdity without delivering genuine laughs. It just really didn't feel like it fit for Gumball's tone and the story it tried to tell. And while earlier episodes had some out-of-character moments, this one takes it to a whole new level. The episode kicks off with Gumball's old best friend, Fuzzy, showing up at his doorstep. This unexpected reunion immediately sparks jealousy in Darwin, who struggles to accept that Gumball had a best friend before him. Sounds familiar, right? Yeah, it gets much worse. The tension escalates as Darwin's jealousy leads him to act out in increasingly erratic ways, like almost trying to cook him. Darwin eventually has a chat with Fuzzy and has a really bad suspicion that Fuzzy is evil, so he scares him off, which is exactly what Darwin wanted. But Gumball feels bad and wants to reconnect with his childhood friend, so Gumball decides to go out by himself to Fuzzy's cabin in the woods. And this is where things take a turn. As it turns out, Darwin's suspicions of Fuzzy were actually true, as he tries to lock him in a cabin and stay there forever with him. But thankfully, Darwin comes to save the day and knocks him out with a shovel. Gumball and Darwin make up, but that wouldn't last for long, as Fuzzy stands back up, revealing that he's actually a killer robot wanting revenge for Gumball abandoning him. So he chases them around Minnesota until they eventually end up in a river cornered, where Hank, Fuzzy's BFF that he abandoned himself, comes back and takes Fuzzy with him. I guess the cycle continues? Darwin's behavior in this episode is significantly different from his usual character. His jealousy turns him into an unlikable figure, which many found out of place. And also, the revelation of Fuzzy's evil plan comes out of nowhere and doesn't align with the show's typical storytelling style. It feels more like a last-minute addition to add drama. The episode also missed the opportunity to explore themes of friendship and jealousy in a nuanced way, but opted for a more sensational and less satisfying route. The BFFs is often criticized for its character inconsistencies, forced plot developments, and differences from the show's core themes, making it have a 6.7 rating on IMDB. While most previous episodes were uncomfortable or upsetting. This one is just entirely gross. The episode kicks off with Richard and Nicole heading out, leaving the kids under the care of Granny JoJo. Gumball, who is already stressing about the kiss that Granny JoJo always gives him, begs Nicole not to have her kiss him this time, but Nicole insists.
She's your grandmother and you're going to let her kiss you on the cheek.
I like getting kissed on the cheek. It makes me feel special.
Granny JoJo slowly walks off the bus. After greeting Anais and Darwin with cheek kisses, she turns to Gumball, and just as she's about to kiss him, someone calls his name, causing him to turn his head, and bam! He gets a full-on kiss on the lips from his grandma. Gumball is immediately traumatized, entering a state of shock. And honestly, Gumball wasn't the only traumatized one. Darwin tries to help Gumball forget the incident by taking him around town to distract him. But everywhere they go, Gumball is haunted by reminders of the kiss, with him hallucinating random objects as Granny JoJo trying to kiss him. Meanwhile, Anais is struggling to push Granny JoJo's suitcase up the stairs. Seriously, what's in this suitcase? Bowling balls? Later at dinner, while they're eating slop, everyone slurping their food reminds Gumball about Granny JoJo's kisses, and they start turning into monsters and corner him. But thankfully, that just turns out to be a nightmare. No matter what Gumball does, he cannot seem to get over this kiss. But this is where Anais gives him the idea that if he goes through something worse than the kiss, he will completely forget it even ever happened. And not really having any other options, Gumball decides to do it. So first, he runs through an obstacle course, doing gross things like jumping into a garbage can, bathing in slime, getting gassed in stink, suffering through awful sounds, and bathing in Hector's toe grease. After all of this, Gumball finally forgets that the kiss actually happened. Meanwhile, at home, Anais finally dragged that suitcase up to Granny JoJo's room.
Oh, well, good for you, dear. Now bring it back down. My bus will be here any minute.
They go outside and get their last kiss on the cheek before they leave. And of course, Gumball gets a kiss and immediately gets traumatized again. The episode is mostly hated for its uncomfortable humor. The entire gag is just based around Gumball getting kissed on the lips by his own grandma, which many viewers found more disturbing than funny. There's also a pretty big lack of resolution. Despite Gumball's effort to set boundaries, the episode ends with his wishes being ignored, sending a questionable message. Darwin and Anais also downplay Gumball's trauma, telling him it's not a big deal, which rubbed many fans the wrong way, since the episode really doesn't show any respect for personal boundaries. Coming in at number 2, we have Promise. The episode starts with Gumball and Darwin just trying to find a seat on the bus, but all of the seats are either taken or so gross that they don't even want to sit in them, which leads them to their last option, at the back of the bus with Banana Joe, who looks really angry for some reason, which is really out of character for him. But it makes sense because Gumball and Darwin have done some crazy things to him.
Is it because we forgot about you on that camping trip and you had to sleep under a tent of your own skin and eat a bit of yourself to survive? And you waited for 3 days in the woods, but then decided to walk home and got lost?
Gumball goes home not thinking much about it, because they're gonna play video games all weekend. But Darwin made a promise and swears to Banana Joe that he'll make things right with him. Back at home, they find out that Adventure of Zelmore is coming out, so their plans of finding the source of Banana Joe's anger quickly goes away. Later that day when they go to the store, they run into Banana Joe, who seems really depressed. You gotta feel bad for the guy. Gumball and Darwin have no respect for my boy Banana Joe.
Well, I've been thinking a lot recently about our friendship, but I just feel that maybe Are you shuffling away from me?
No! I feel like it's you who's moving away from us.
Well, it's true that recently I felt a little...
Anyways, Gumball and Darwin continue to be selfish, completely ignoring Banana Joe while they're out and get back to their game that they've been waiting to play for months, while in the process completely ditching Banana Joe. But Darwin feels guilty about this, so right when Gumball is about to put the game out, Darwin tries to sneak out and go to Banana Joe, but fails miserably. Darwin, in a last attempt, quite literally tries to brainwash Gumball, but that doesn't work and Gumball forces him back inside to play with him. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Banana Joe is at the school by himself, and it turns out the reason he needed someone there was to spot him when he was lifting weights for a workout video in the school gym. Banana Joe fails the rep and quite literally starts getting crushed alive by the weight. This is super sad to see, and it could have been completely avoided if Gumball and Darwin were good friends to him. This episode is literally just Banana Joe torture. Nothing that happened to him in this episode was deserved, and it really just leaves you feeling bad for him. This episode was rated a 6.6 on IMDb, but this next one, which is the lowest rated Gumball episode of all time, is rated at a 5.2, which really shows just how bad this is gonna be. Coming in at number 1, the most hated Gumball episode of all time, we have The Girlfriend, which starts with Jamie barging into the school cafeteria, bullying literally anyone she sees. But this time, instead of her usual antics, she has a revelation after witnessing Alan's act of kindness towards Carmen, and this makes Jamie think that she needs a sweetheart of her own. And unfortunately for Darwin, she sets her sights on him. And Darwin is the worst person this could have happened to, because he's too nice to say no. Jamie aggressively pursues Darwin, declaring him her boyfriend without any consent. Gumball tries to help his brother escape this unwanted relationship, but Jamie's intimidation tactics make it nearly impossible. She even threatens Gumball, shoving him into a locker and leaving him bruised and battered.
Okay, rule 1. If you ignore me or break up with me, there will be serious consequences involving you, me, a spoon, and a salt shaker.
This episode is already super uncomfortable, but it only gets worse. As the episode progresses, Jamie's possessiveness intensifies. She misinterprets Darwin's actions, leading to violent outbursts, including attacking Sarah and assaulting Richard. Gumball becomes a victim too, forced to act as a bench for the couple. Jamie's behavior becomes increasingly crazy, resulting in her deciding to date Gumball as well, which is crazy.
Gumball, from now on, you're my boyfriend too.
You may now kiss the brides. You already have a job. Your job is to look after the kids.
Do you, notice anything different?
You look older.
After this, Gumball starts running away, and we get one of the creepiest sequences in the entire show, of Jamie chasing Gumball through the hall. And when Gumball finally gets cornered in the library, Jamie has a moment of realization that she went too far, and decides to stop being crazy and forcing Gumball and Darwin to be in a relationship with her, which sounds like it should be a heartfelt moment, but it's not even a big payoff because of how weird and creepy this episode was in the first place. This episode is just garbage. I don't even know how this got approved in the first place. But yeah, those were the 10 most hated Gumball episodes according to IMDb. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with it. And make sure to subscribe or I will find you and force you to watch The Girlfriend. You do not want to do that. Subscribe! Subscribe!